So I'm going to go straight on from my circular yoke to do the hem. So I've put a lifeline through the stitches just in case anything goes wrong. And I'm going to do a 1x1 rib. I'm going to push my ribber up into place. And I'm making sure that my ribber is set on pitch. So my needles are opposing each other. And I'm going to go ahead and transfer every second needle from the main bed down to my ribber. So my garment tension I was working was 9 and a dot for my colour work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down for the rib tension, and the standard tends to be 2 whole numbers, so I would come down to 7 and a dot, but I'm actually going to come down 2 further dot sizes. So I'm going to be knitting on tension 6 and 2 dots. So on this size that I'm making, which is a size large, I had 37 left and right. Now that means when I come to do first needle on the main bed, second needle on the ribber, and alternating, I actually end up with 2 needles on the end. Now when it comes to seaming the second yoke, that would mean that I would have, after removing 1 stitch into the seam, I would have 2 knit stitches next to each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to decrease that end stitch in, but rather than just moving it over and losing the definition of that edge stitch, I'm actually going to take the second needle in, place it over to the end needle, and then move both of these needles back. And then I'm going to put all of the empty needles on the main bed that have been transferred to the ribber down to out of work position. And I'm just going to bring the needles that are in work slightly forward, still in B position, and I'm going to make sure that I come in and hang plenty of weight just to ensure that this knits cleanly. So my main carriage is all set for normal. I'm down at tension dial 6 and 2 dots. My ribber carriage is all set for normal, and that again is on 6 and 2 dots with the lower lever to 1. I'm going to make sure that my row tripper is engaged, and I'm going to reset. So I'm going to explain what I want to achieve with my collar. I'm going to do a folded ribbed collar, so it's going to be double thickness, and as I get to the turning point, I'm going to be decreasing every few rows by 2 dots. So if I make my collar depth 12 rows, then I'm going to decide after X amount of rows decrease 2 dots. So I might want to come down every 3rd row. So at the moment I'm on 6 and 2 dots. I would knit 3 rows, come down 2 dots in tension on both carriages, knit 3 rows, come down again in the tension, knit 3 rows, until I reach the 12 rows. You may decide you don't want to do 2 dots, you may decide you want to come down 3 dots. It's entirely up to you. Just be sure that you repeat the same amount of reduction on the ribber tension as you do on the main bed. Now if you were only doing a single band or a single thickness band, then it's at this point you would want to bind off. I recommend that you have a look into the Brother Ribber Techniques book or the Mary Weaver Brother Techniques book in order to research on how to bind off in the 1x1. But because I'm going to fold over this band, then I want to increase my tension for one row as a turning row and then come back down to the tension that I'm currently sitting on. So I'm going to go up to tension 6 and a dot, and I've come from 3 and 2 dots. Knit that row, come back down to my 3 and 2 dots, and you can see I'm on 13. Now you can decide at this point if you want to reset your row counter again to count up to 12, or if you're happy to carry on. And what I might do, instead of doing 3 passes, I might just do 2 in order to try and keep the inside of the neckband, which is the second part that we're knitting after our loose turning row, to try and keep that a little bit shorter to prevent the neckband from wanting to kick out and away from the chest. So we're done with the ribbon, and we now want to transfer the ribber needles back to the main bed, and then we're going to drop our ribber out of the way once we've finished transferring all of these stitches. So now we've finished transferring all of the needles from the ribber bed to the main bed. We're going to just take off the sinker plate because we're not going to be doing any more rib, and we're going to take off the majority of our weights that we have hung on to the project. The claw weights that we remove, we're going to bring these back in and place them to the right side of the work, so hook them from the back in towards you evenly, and you want to get it so that the hooks are sitting as close to the gate pegs as possible, with missing the loose row that we can see here. And we do that so that the weight keeps the live loops in the hooks of the needles, so that we can come back. I'm just going to put my ribber cover on here so that it doesn't end up catching the work on the gate pegs. I'm going to bring the work over the front of my ribber, and I'm going to find the row where the lifeline was placed in, and I'm going to hang that up, very much like the hung hem at the end of work video that I have on my channel. I would leave the lifeline in just in case you decide that you don't like the tension of the rib at the end and you may want to unravel it. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off hanging and sewing to secure this hung hem rib. So when we're looking for our stitch, I can see my green contrast lifeline going in, and I'm wanting to pick up the stitch that the lifeline is running through. So in this case I've got the purl bump, and then the next stitch I need is this knit stitch. So I want to catch the ladder here, and then into the purl bump. Again, I can see where the line is. Come in and pick up that bump. Again, where the green line is, pick up the ladder and carry on along. Just make sure that you're only picking up the stitch and you don't split it, and that you don't catch the ravel cord either, which can be quite easy to do when you're trying to pick up the knit columns, like so. So I'm going to try and come in on top of the ravel cord to catch just that ladder in the V. So I've gone ahead and pushed all of the stitches back against the gateposts. All of my needles are pulled out to D position, or E if you're on the Brother. I want to take my yarn and cut at least 3 lengths. So I'm actually going to wrap this around the needles a total of 3 times, giving me 6 widths and a little bit more. And then I'm going to come in with my sewing needle or darning needle, and I'm going to do the sewn bind off. If you don't want to do the sewn bind off, then of course you can do a loose row and do a latch tool bind off. However, you may run the risk of causing a tightness over where the fabric has been folded back down, which means that it may be hard to get the neck area over your head. And if you want a better look at how to do this sewn bind off, then you can have a look at the hung hem stockinette band video that I've already done. What you're looking out for when you complete this type of bind off is to make sure that 1, you don't pull the yarn too tight, and 2, that you catch both stitches on the needle. So make sure you catch the initial stitch where the lifeline was, and then the final live stitch, being careful not to split any of the yarns, and continue this along the rest of the work, keeping it at a medium tension. You don't want to over tighten this, you'll cause binding on the stretch of the fabric. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave a comment, and until the next time, you've been watching Button Mouse the Wee Machine Knitter.